This is the Paul Robeson Archives office. It was established in 1973 to collect and organize all of the available information on the late Paul Robeson. The prime responsibility for cataloging this sea of documents, writings, music scores, photographs, books, recordings, and film lies in the hands of his son, Paul Robeson, Jr. His is a truly singular task and a most difficult one, because there is so much material to gather from all over the world. It is also a labor of love. This documentary film is about the life of Paul Robeson. It was begun several months before he passed away in January of 1976. Much of the visual material came from this archive. Many hours were spent here poring over the material on this unusual man. There has unfolded the story of a man of prodigious abilities, and not just in drama, film, singing, sports, but in scholarship, profoundly so. And also, there has emerged the story of a man of extraordinary principle who refused to bend even 1 inch away from his convictions, no matter what the price. This, then, is the extraordinary story of an extraordinary man, Paul Robeson.
We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We're soldiers in this fight.
I started as an actor, you know, as an artist in the Provincetown Theater with Mr. Eugene O'Neill way back in the 20s. I did The Emperor Jones, and What Those Children Got Wings with the distinguished, I did in London with the distinguished English actress Paul Robeson years ago. I came over way back in 1922. And not only came over, but had the privilege and great pleasure of playing a whole summer with Mrs. Patrick Campbell in the play, which was about the Negro South and then going back to Africa. I was to be some kind of a chieftain. I fall asleep at the end of the first act, and sort of in a dream, I sort of fall asleep as opposed to I whistle and being very gay, and before you know it, I'm back in Africa. And I tried my best falling asleep to whistle, and I still can't whistle, as you can hear me right now. I just can't whistle to this day. And so I broke out into a sort of a, Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go, to a very beautiful spiritual that I remembered as a child. And as I sort of hummed this, I heard a voice from the wings. Sing it louder, sing it louder, as if it were a part of the play. And Miss Wyborg finally saw the play later in the week in Liverpool. The play had really turned into a musical. Luckily for me, I got very nice reviews from it and found out that I was a singer. Finally went, I remember, to study with Madame Chern-René, a great singer at Juilliard, a great singing teacher. But it was very clear to me, even in those days, that I wanted to be a singer of the folk songs of my people. And I did not want to become a Wagnerian opera singer, because I wanted my voice to come from inside me.
I first met that great artist, kind, generous, and gentle man, Paul Robeson, in 1922 in London. I never realized then that I would pay for him.
Dear Larry, one of the great authorities on our folk music, and one of the great arrangers of our folk songs, just a master of the rhythm of our music, and our early programs, which more or less for 5 years were devoted specifically to the folk song of our own people.
It was a mere accident. I met him on the corner of 135th Street and 7th Avenue in March 1925. And he asked me, say, what are you doing tonight? I said, I'm not doing anything. He says, will you go down into the village with me? James Light, who had directed him in The Emperor Jones and in All God's Children, both O'Neill plays. And so we went down in the village, and by sheer accident, he decided to sing some of my arrangements, which I had arranged in London, and I happened to join in with him. And James Light was so excited, he said, why don't you two guys give a program together? He says, I can arrange it for you at the Greenwich Village Theater. Well, that's the way it happened. We were frightened to death.
It was awesome. It was constant. It wasn't just into the centers of literary material. Wherever he went in the country, I don't care what country he was in, he found himself among the artists. He found himself among the people who sang songs or sang chants. He constantly wanted to know what everything meant. He wanted to know where it all came from. And then pretty soon, this enormous cranium of his, this genius that housed, this head that housed so much genius, he would go to Czechoslovakia, or he'd go to the Soviet Union, or he'd go to England, or whatever, and he would hear a song. And he would immediately translate that song to something that had to do with a tribe in Africa. Or hear a melody somewhere in Africa, and he would remember that he heard it being sung by the Welsh miners. Then he'd want to know how the hell did it all get there? Did the sailors bring it? Was it just a coincidence? What has been going on in this byway of life? And he sang in almost every language. He spoke many languages, but phonetically, those languages he didn't speak, he was able to learn phonetically and learn them meticulously. He was conscious about the highest form of the art, and he didn't want to be just an American singing a song of someone in another country. He wanted to get the nuances. He wanted to get the absolute. He wanted the people, when they heard him sing it, for them to assume that he came from that part of Ireland, that part of Wales, that part of Germany. So and he drove me crazy, because having set this standard, I then said, well, that's the only way to really find out what a song is.
To the songs of many peoples of the world, songs that I find very similar to my own, incidentally. All the folk music of the world might interest you very, are very similar in one respect. Not only because peoples have the same aspirations and feelings in scales. One scale of our music, which is predominant, is a so-called five-tone scale, sort of a big word for it, pentatonic, that can be played on the 5 black keys of the piano, which form a natural five-tone scale. And, for example, 2 groups of songs, mostly in this scale, and very similar to my own, are Chinese folk songs and Scotch Hebridean folk songs. And extremely interesting, again, will be that what you call the disjunct form, in F. Let's take the conjunct form, which would begin with the say, the 4th on B flat.
The study of the Negro spiritual has now characterizes my programs, which most of the critics have characterized as a program showing the unity, the relation of Negro music to all the music of the world. For example, in my programs, I start with an old English song like Over the Mountains. Over the mountains and over the waves, under the fountains and under the graves, under floods that are deepest, which Neptune obey, over rocks that are steepest, love will find out the way. Very nice idea, as a matter of fact.
Very nice.
So the idea of my concert is one suggestion that all men are brothers because of their music. And in my first group, I do an old English song. I do an old song from about the 11th or 12th century from Czechoslovakia. The Moravian chorales of about the 11th and 12th centuries preceded the chorales upon which Johann Sebastian Bach based his music. So I take this, and then I do a Bach chorale, and then I create a slight confusion by doing a Negro spiritual right in the middle, because it belongs there. Mm-hmm. And I found that out by going back to Africa. For example, there was an old, in East Africa, there is a chorale form that reached a form just pre-Bach in Europe. Very interesting. and Jabala Jabata ye, Jabala Bata ye, Jabala Bata Bata ye, Jabala Bata ye, Mzungu Mzungu wachine, Mzungu Mzungu wachine. Svati Vatsklavă, vive do České země. The first was African, almost, and you say they're very similar. The first was African. The second is from the 11th century in Czechoslovakia with a chorale that just preceded Bach.
And so a young and magnificently gifted Paul Robeson was on his way in a career that would make him the best-known man in the world within 15 years. Paul Robeson, the son of a preacher who was once a slave. Paul Robeson, who grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and from the very start exhibited the promise of greatness. Everyone in town, his neighbors, teachers, classmates, just knew that Paul was going to be somebody. But who would have guessed how much of a somebody he'd become? He was always big for his age, but as fast and agile as a cat. He was always involved in some sport or another, right through these early school days. Then as he entered college, his body began to really develop. And so did his mind, staggeringly so. He was a near-perfect student. He attended Rutgers College on a scholarship. From 1915 through 1919, he amassed Phi Beta Kappa honors. He was elected to the Cap and Skull Society, was debating champion, and was valedictorian of his graduating class. And bear in mind that the racist climate in America was never more intense. Robeson didn't fit into the typical bookworm mold. He now stood well over 6 feet and had muscles for days. He took that magnificent physique and he used it to win himself 13 varsity letters. However, he wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms by his fellow students. He was barred from singing in the campus glee club, and when he tried out for the football team, his teammates broke his nose and deliberately stomped on his hand, tearing every fingernail off of his hand. Years later, the memory still lingered. He became one of the greatest football players of all time. A great pass receiver, overwhelming offensive blocker, tackle, and the best defensive linebacker of his era. He was Rutgers University's first All-America football player. The sports headlines of the day tell it like it was. As great as he was, however, Paul Robeson was not great enough to be listed in the College Football Hall of Fame, even though the hall was at one time located right on the Rutgers campus. When he graduated Rutgers with highest academic honors, he enrolled in the Columbia University Law School. The campus overlooked Harlem, where he moved into an apartment. Here, the relatively unworldly young law student was exposed to a Harlem that was in the midst of its fabulous Renaissance era. It all had its impact on Paul. Politically, the Marcus Garvey African nationalist movement, with a following of tens of thousands, emphasized Africanness for Afro-Americans. It was in full swing. And then culturally, artists like Duke Ellington had become a regular at the Cotton Club. Duke's early compositions also stressed Africanness. In the field of education, Harlem proffered the intellect of W.E.B. Du Bois. In short, Harlem was booming with activity, and young Paul Robeson, fresh out of quiet New Jersey, drank it all in. Conversely, Harlem threw her arms wide open to him. He was drawn into film acting in the black-produced film of Oscar Micheaux. He was also invited to sing with a number of groups. On weekends, he played pro football, all this while doing brilliantly at Columbia Law School. Oh, and by the way, he managed to find time to fall in love and marry a striking young anthropologist, Eslanda Cardoza Good. He graduated Columbia with his law degree, but he met bias in the law firm he was working for and eventually quit the profession of law. Young Paul Robeson set his sights elsewhere. Armed with talent, brain, brawn, a brilliant and talented wife at his side, Paul Robeson was ready to take on the world. But was the world ready for him? Paul Robeson arrived in London, England, to appear in the overseas version of the new musical Showboat, written by Jerome Kern, lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein. Actress Marie Burke played the role of Julie.
We'd been rehearsing for about a week, and Paul was late because he'd been playing in New York. We just finished, and there was a break when the door opened, and standing in the doorway was a tall, distinguished gentleman. And we all knew that it was Paul Robeson. Jerome Kern, who was 5'2", 3", perhaps, rushed from the piano stool, nearly sent it flying, and put his arms around Paul's middle, because that's about as far as he could get. Said, "My God, Paul, it's marvelous to see you. Now come on over here. I want to hear my song, Old Man River, sung by you, because I had you in mind when I wrote it." And Paul just walked up and put his arm on top of the piano, and this beautiful voice, this organ of a voice, came out, and he sang.
Again in the 1935 film version of the play. Over the years, he gradually changed the Oscar Hammerstein lyrics from what originally included several repetitions of the word nigger. Years later, Robeson would transform Old Man River from a song of black indolence to one of resistance and defiance to oppression.
You show a little grit and you land in the jail. But I keep laughing instead of crying. I must keep fighting until I'm dying. And Old Man River, he'll just keep rolling on.
Robeson was the toast of England. He was accorded unprecedented acclaim for a black man. He was revered by the theatrical lions because of his impressive 1930 portrayal of Othello in London. His prodigious intellect attracted the scholarly. His voice, lent to singing folk music, endeared him to the working class. His awesome physical presence attracted artists from all over the world who sought to immortalize him in his prime.
When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go, my people go, go down, Moses, way down.
Through it all, he continued to pore over books on music, anthropology, and especially languages. The Robeson legend was growing, and so was his concert itinerary. He visited and performed on 3 continents, traveled extensively with his wife and their son, Paul Jr. Eslanda, an anthropologist, had scholarly interests that meshed perfectly with her husband. They were both about the mutuality of mankind. Robeson was especially impressed with Russia for a number of reasons. He found no color bar there in these times, the 30s. He was taken with the political system of the Soviet Union. He also found strong similarities between the Russian and African cultures and languages.
Хорошие ребята, жизнь по-своему переделают, людьми станут настоящими людьми.
His comments were picked up by the world press, but nary an eyebrow was raised, not even here in America. Robeson's film career was also mushrooming. He was the first black man to make motion pictures that had a semblance of dignity and character. He was far from satisfied, but nonetheless roles such as the lead in Emperor Jones were extraordinary.
Mr. President. No. King Brutus. No, somehow that don't make enough noise. Smithers, cigarette. Smithers, you have just had an audience with the Emperor Jones.
The scholar, actor, singer in Paul Robeson all function now in perfect synchronization toward a single goal, to show the world that the black man had a unique and potent culture that rivaled that of any other culture in the world. And who could argue with this man? There he was, as living proof, black, beautiful, and brilliant. In 1935, Robeson made another film, Sanders of the River. Again, an African theme. But the editing turned out a final product in a story far removed from what he thought it would be. It turned out validating the colonization of Africa. Robeson was furious with the end result, and he walked out on the premiere performance. And so in his next film, he had a clause written into his contract that gave him final approval. He was much happier with the result of the second film, a film story about the descendant of an African king who was in Europe but determined to find his way back to his roots.
Yes?
The gentleman asked us to call.
Which gentleman? Appointment?
Yes, sir.
This way.
Don't call him, sir.
No? What shall I call him?
Call him nothing.
These people want to see Mr. Donizetti. Name, please?
Mr. John Zinger.
And Mrs. Zinger.
Page. Take a seat. Mr. and Mrs. John Zinger.
Ah, my friends, at last. I thought you were never coming. Look after the lady. I'm delighted to see you. I cannot tell you what a joy it is to me. We'll waste no time. To work at once. Now, come on. No explaining. Come along. No, stop. The breathing is all wrong. You see, the muscles for the breathing, they come from the diaphragm. So, and the voice, they come from here. So, you see, voice, breathing, voice. Now, again, another note. Me. No. Chin up. So. Now, again. Me, And now, we will try escape.
You want me to do that?
Yes, this. Good. Now it's still higher.
Well, I came here to sing, not to make these noises.
But dear fellow, Mr. Donazet, really wants to help you. It's part of your training.
I don't want any training. You smack me in the stomach and I sing la la la. Always been able to sing on the docks without being smacked in the stomach. And what's more, I can't sing with all this stuff on. I like to be comfortable. I'm not a tailor's dummy.
John.
Well, if they want me to sing, I gotta be free, not trussed up like a chicken.
The mantle of fame had an unusual effect on Paul Robeson. He gravitated more and more to the working class of people. His songs were of them and for them. By 1937, he was booking most of his concerts with ticket prices that the poor could afford. As Robeson developed as an artist, so did he develop as a humanist. He resolved to lend himself to the cause of oppressed people wherever they were, whatever color they were. In the late 30s, as fascism started its bloody sweep across Europe, Robeson supported the loyalist forces in Spain, who were fighting almost single-handed against fascist German tyranny. He did so by going to Spain, out among the loyalist fighting men, and by giving concerts.
They wanted to take you, but you're courageous children. But you're courageous children. But you're
This kind of artistic militancy won Robeson friendships with people like Nehru of India and a young Kenyan who would later become a feared and respected leader of his people, Jomo Kenyatta. Back in America, the tensions were building as World War II was about to erupt. It was Paul Robeson who found a song that seemed to provide the unifying force that America needed at the time. It was called Ballad for Americans.
In 76 the sky was red, thunder rumbling overhead. Bad King George couldn't sleep in his bed, and on that stormy morn, old Uncle Sam was born.
Say, you please tell us who you are?
What's your name, buddy? Where are you going? Who are you?
Are you an American?
Am I an American? I'm just an Irish, Negro, Jewish, Italian, French, and English, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, Polish, Scotch, Hungarian, Litvak, Swedish, Finnish, Canadian, Greek, and Turk, and Czech, and double-Czech American.
With the outbreak of World War II, Robeson threw his full energies into the war effort. He gave endless free concerts to raise American war bonds. He toured for the USO. He loudly stated and deeply believed that if blacks helped to defeat fascism, America would end racism and give the black man his due.
From the plains and mountains we have sprung to keep the faith with those who went before. Old Sam put on a three-cornered hat.
Robeson was roundly applauded in America for his patriotism. His continued public expressions of admiration for the Soviets raised no hackles whatsoever, because Russia was an ally during these war years.
He was perhaps unusual at that time in being, as he has so many times been ahead of his time. He had been by then what we used to call a premature anti-fascist. That is, he became aware of fascism and its dangers in the early 30s and resolved to fight against it every way he could, and went to Spain and so on. But in the 40s, when everyone agreed that the Axis had to be defeated, he also said that in fighting against fascism and their kind of racism, we had to at the same time fight against black oppression here and against racism in the United States. And as a matter of fact, I recall his calling the racists and the Ku Klux Klan and so on in the U.S. as the cousins, if not the brothers, of Hitler's Nazis. And that was unusual then. It's he was an early civil rights fighter in that sense, since he was at the same time as the war bond rallies were going on, and he was one of the champion fundraisers for those kinds of things. He was vocally and publicly very critical of racism in the United States, and that it was absolutely necessary to eradicate it.
As a former athlete, he was angry that at this late date there were no blacks playing Major League Baseball. And so he led a delegation before the Major League club owners, demanding that the color bar be broken. It wouldn't be very long afterward that this young man would benefit from the militant action of Paul Robeson. Robeson's star continued to rise. He was a sellout concert attraction. He received endless awards from labor groups, many ethnic organizations, Greek, Jewish, and the like, and several honorary degrees from colleges like Morehouse in Atlanta and Howard University in Washington, D.C. Even his own alma mater, Rutgers University. And then came the coup de grace. In 1943, he opened on Broadway in Othello, the first time a black man would play Shakespeare's Moor on Broadway. He would play the role a total of 3 times over a 30-year span, but it was the Margaret Webster production in 1943 that would go down as the definitive portrayal of the role for all time.
I had seen Robeson play Othello in London quite a few years earlier, and I frankly hadn't thought that he was very good. But he said to me then that he himself didn't think he was very good, and that now he had studied and restudied the role, and he felt that he was ready to play it, and why couldn't we do it together? And I was enthusiastic about this idea, particularly if I could have got Maurice Evans to play Yaga. I couldn't persuade Maurice to do it, nor could Paul or I, between us, persuade any other New York management to take the risk of doing a play in which a black man, A, made love to, and B, murdered a white woman. We finally got management, and it wasn't then an altogether easy job to get actors to do it, especially at this moment. We got Joe Ferrer and Uta Hagen. Now, Joe Ferrer had never played Shakespeare in his life. Uta gave from the beginning a beautiful performance at Desdemona. And Paul brought qualities with him which I never have seen equaled before or since. The moment he stepped onto that stage, he was not only a black man, but he was a great black man, a man of stature. Somehow or other he put the play in focus. The opening night in New York is something I never will forget. It was the late summer of 43, wasn't it? Ran through the 43-44 season. And it was one of those nights where absolutely everything went right, and the whole theater sort of caught fire.
It is the cause. It is the cause, my soul. Let me not name it to you, you chaste stars. It is the cause. Yet I'll not shed her blood, nor scar that whiter skin of hers than snow, and smooth as monumental alabaster. Yet she must die, else she'll betray more men. Put out the light, and then put out the light. One more, and this the last. So sweet was an air so fatal. I must weep, but they are cruel tears. This sorrow's heavenly. It strikes where it doth love.
It was a breathtaking performance that won him the coveted Diction Award. Robeson had poured endless hours into preparing for the role. He even went so far in quest of special nuances as to rehearse certain passages in several languages.
More than pertains to iets broil in battle, als was zum Streit geheert und werd der Schlacht. Ein wenig lehren dich von dem Lauf der Welt, als was zum Streit geheert und werd der Schlacht. Therefore little shall I grace my cause in speaking for myself. Drum wenig schmuck, wo leicht meine Sache, red ich für mich. Et je sais dire pas de choses de ce vaste monde, qui n'y rapporte au fait de guerre et de bataille.
I seem to remember reading when you came over in 1930 that you made a special study of English speech for playing Othello. Have you done the same this time?
Well, sort of once. Let's go back to 1930, which was the very definite time. Of course, in America, as I say, I had just come over from America, and we like to say pass and chance and do for the morning dew. And I happened to pick up an old script of Shakespeare, and the dew was very clear. It was D-I-E-W, and it was not chance, C-H-A-U-N-C-E, so it was dew, like in lieu of, and chance and dance, very, very Shakespearean. And one terrible, difficult sound was my, almost at the beginning of the play, my services, which I have done the scenery, my services. I would say my services. I had to work on that very hard. But later I took some special work at the University of London, and also in my university days I majored in English, and I have records from the earliest time, from time of Anglo-Saxons, as a matter of fact, through Chaucer. And of course, since I worked on my songs with Roger Quilter, and I would have to use the role, I couldn't walk out here and say, drink to me only with thine eyes, and I will pledge with mine. It's got to be very, drink to me only with thine eyes, and I will pledge.
I think Paul Robeson had a good beginning, in that he grew up in an environment where he was reminded of the fact that he had responsibility, and he was the first artist, activist, black or white, in this country, who saw that his role extended far beyond the stage, and that when the curtain fell, that wasn't the end of his act and the end of his commitment, and that the broader community needed some attention and needed some commitment from the artist.
I feel that this bears a good deal on the credibility of the jealousy. That Othello comes from a different culture. For example, suppose an English lad married, say, a girl from Malaya, and the Malayan Iago started on him. Well, he might not quite know what to do. This is very important, I feel, in the development.
The bewilderment is, in fact, a matter of him being a stranger in the society.
That's one of the things that would bear on the jealousy.
But you're not trying to push the jealousy out of the window, are you?
Obviously, you can't put... But this is an extremely important point, too. As Othello says, that he kills not in hate, but in honor. And he says to Iago, you know, I didn't see it, I didn't think it, you know, I slept the next night well. I found not Cassio's kisses on her lips. And if I had not known it, it had been quite some other thing. But, so it wasn't just the act of infidelity. It was the destruction of himself as a human being, of his human dignity. And may I add, in thinking of the part myself, that I related that dignity not to myself personally, say, in a modern society, but to my whole people, important in Othello's defense of what he calls his honor and his dignity. She wakes.
Who's there? Othello.
I, Desdemona.
Will you come to bed, my lord?
Have you prayed tonight, Desdemona?
Aye, my lord.
If you bethink yourself of any crime, unreconciled as yet to heaven and grace, solicit for its straight.
Yes, my lord, what may you mean by that?
Well, do it and be brief. I will walk by. I would not kill thy unprepared spirit. No, heaven forfend. I would not kill thy soul.
Talk you of killing?
Aye, I do.
I know you so your nether lip. Some bloody passion shakes your very frame. These are portents, and yet I hope they do not point on me.
Peace and be still.
I will so. What's the matter?
That handkerchief which I so loved and gave thee, thou gavest to Cassio.
Oh, by my life and soul. Send for the man and ask him.
Sweet soul, take heed of perjury. I saw the handkerchief.
Oh, but then I never gave it him. Send for him hither, let him confess a truth.
He hath confessed.
What, my lord?
That he hath used thee.
How? Unlawfully?
I
will not say so.
No, his mouth is stopped. Honest Iago hath ta'en order for it.
I hear interprets then. What, is he dead?
Had all his hairs been lives,
My great revenge had stomach for them all.
Oh. You've betrayed, and I am done.
Out, strumpet. Weepst thou for him to my face?
Banish me, my lord, but kill me not.
Down, strumpet.
Kill me tomorrow, let me live tonight.
Nay, if you strive.
But half an hour.
Being done, there is no pause.
But what? I see one prayer.
It is too late.
Why, it was almost too much, all of this coming out of a single human being. The whole nation and Western free world seemed to stand up and applaud Paul Robeson. He was a symbol that countless parents urged their children to grow up and try to be like. He was, quote, a credit to his race, unquote, a true giant among men. At a mammoth birthday party celebrating his 44th birthday at the 17th Regiment Armory, a galaxy of celebrities turned out. Mary McLeod Bethune proclaimed Paul Robeson as the tallest tree in our forest. Robeson now stood at the mountaintop of popularity. The valley lay ahead.
We're so